to speak about any topic I wanted, because it came with a catch. I had to follow Bernard Lewis, which is pretty much like a singer following Frank Sinatra. So I will do my best, but it's really an honor to be with you, Bernard. Compared to the Prime Minister's father, you're still a very young man. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but it's an honor to be here, an honor to get an opportunity to speak. The topic that I wanted to discuss today, I know is a topic that's going to be addressed in this conference. I was hoping to be here when they addressed it, but unfortunately time demands that I be elsewhere, is the battle for Israel's legitimacy, the assault on Israel's legitimacy. And I have good news. No one is in denial that we have a problem. That's the good news. The first step to recovery is to get over denial. And we are well past denial. Everybody understands this is a problem. It's a serious problem. There have been a number of serious studies done on this, are being done. Dori Gold's Institute has done very serious work on it. The Reut Institute has done serious work on it. And I think we see that for the first time in a long time, people are starting to take this seriously. Now, the bad news is, and from my point of view at least, that building an effective strategy to counter the assault on Israel's legitimacy requires a very good understanding of the problem. If you don't have a good understanding of the problem, then you can come up with great ideas, but it's not necessarily going to resolve it. And here, I think that we have seen a lot of wishful thinking about what the problem is. And I would say that that wishful thinking is both on the left and on the right. The wishful thinking on the left is essentially that the problem with Israel's legitimacy, the assault on Israel's legitimacy, is simply a function of Israel's policies. If Israel would change its policies, would abide by the will of the international community, by what they might call international norms, then Israel's reputation would improve. Our standing would improve. Now, you heard that argument during Oslo. You heard it Camp David. You heard it with the disengagement. And whether you agree or disagree with those policies is not really the question. There was an argument that was made that these policies would actually enhance Israel's image in the world and improve its standing. I remember very vividly then Prime Minister Ehud Barak coming off the plane after returning from Camp David, and he walked onto the tarmac, and there was a podium set up, I think a little bit higher than this one. And he said, "We haven't achieved peace." That's true. We went the extra mile. We haven't achieved peace. But the entire world now knows that Israel wants peace. And the world will stand with Israel. That's more or less, I'm paraphrasing what he said. And the former Prime Minister was right. The world stood with Israel for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. It's not nothing. 6 weeks. Then at the end of September 2000, the Palestinians launched a terror campaign against the State of Israel, and that support evaporated very quickly. People may not remember how quickly that support evaporated because that was a year before September 11th. But between September 2000 and September 11th, 2001, terrorism was seen more or less as a Jewish problem. And the world did not back Israel in the way that it should have, despite overtures to peace. Same thing happened, by the way, with regards to the disengagement. There was an argument that was made that this would improve Israel's international standing. Well, we all have seen how much that improved Israel's international standing. After thousands of missiles get launched on us, after we respond in ways that no country has ever responded in to remove civilians from harm's way, unprecedented efforts by a military to do so, we were accused of war crimes, They want to arrest our officers and political leaders. And then we, of course, got the infamous Goldstone report. Now, I would love to tell you that no one believes anymore that if Israel makes concessions, Israel's international standing will improve. I can't say that. There are still people who believe that. There are fewer and fewer, many fewer than was true after Camp David, many fewer than after the disengagement. But there are still people who say, look, if Israel gets up and leaves Judea and Samaria, returns to the 1967 lines, that the world will be on our side. We abide by international demands. The world will be with us in any future conflict. Now, I cannot disprove that as if it's some physics experiment. But I can say that I think that my 6-year-old's belief in the tooth fairy is more grounded in fact than that view. Now, I've gone to great lengths to convince him of the tooth fairy, by the way. Now, but I have to say I also see delusions that are coming from the right. Now, the delusion from the right is actually the inverse of this problem. They also think the problem is with policy. They think that the policies that have been driven by those on the left side of the political aisle in Israel have actually caused the collapse in Israel's legitimacy. And I see many heads nodding in the room. They believe that Israel's offer to make these sweeping concessions, Israel's unilateral withdrawals, have essentially sawed off the limb on which Israel's legitimacy rests. And usually there are calls among these people for a focus on rights, to reassert Israel's rights, to reassert Israel's historical connection to the land, to reassert our claims under international law, to stop using the language of our enemies by referring to illegal occupation, occupied territory, Arab land, all sorts of statements that have become commonplace. They say we have to sort of reclaim the narrative. Now, I'm very sympathetic with that point of view in general, because I believe that an insistent, constant focus on peace exclusively is actually not a winning argument if it's not supplanted by your rights. And I'll do a little thought experiment to convince all of you of what I just said. Imagine you're watching television. You don't really know all the facts. Two people are having an argument. One person says to the other, you stole my house, you stole my house, you stole my house. The other person says, well, I was going to give 95% of it back to you. I was going to give 97% of it back to you. But you started a fight with me. You waged war against me. Who do you think won the argument? Exactly. You stole my house. And so therefore the failure to assert rights, the focus exclusively on Israel's desire for peace, has not been a winning strategy from the point of view of public diplomacy. I also believe that by reasserting our historical rights, by reclaiming the narrative, we do a great job at arming our supporters. Because people who are in this fight with us need to have those facts. They need to be armed with them. And I have no doubt that our situation would improve. But I would be deluding myself if I told you that this was the reason why this assault on Israel's legitimacy is taking place. That if we would only talk about our rights to this land, if we would only mention and state the facts from 1948 to 1967, not even 48, well before 1948, that the world would be on our side. Because the core problem we face is not an ignorance of history. It's not an ignorance of fact. And I say that with probably the world's finest historian sitting right in front of me. That's not the core problem that we face. We have a much deeper and much broader problem. The assault against us is driven by values. And it's not just an assault against Israel. It is much broader and much deeper than that. It is assault against what was once called the West. Our core problem is a certain value system, and values also have fellow travelers, not just people. A group of values that many people champion, and Israel is in direct confrontation with those values. Values such as moral relativism, the belief that there's not any right or wrong; cultural relativism, that there's no better or worse way to organize a society, and if there is, it's usually the third world's way of doing it, third worldism, or maybe you could call it noble savagism. There is a belief that power and justice are like the proverbial buckets in the well. When one goes up, the other one goes down. The more powerful a country is, the less just it is. The weaker party is always perceived to be the party that is just. There is pacifism, the belief that military force is almost always illegitimate. And there, of course, this view that there is really no truth and falsehood. It's all a question of competing narratives. Every side is just a little bit right, and the truth always lies somewhere in the middle. I find this view to be quite amusing. You take somebody who believes in the Holocaust, somebody who doesn't believe in the Holocaust, and one says 6 million, one says 0, maybe it's 3 million. Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. But these views work together to form a zeitgeist, a modern-day zeitgeist that is directed not merely at the state of Israel, but in many, many countries, including first and foremost the United States. Now, we, though, are at a big disadvantage because we are the low-hanging fruit. We are an easy target. There are countries in the world that have terrible records on issues like human rights, but attacking them comes with a price. For many countries, attacking Israel is actually good for politics. We are this low-hanging fruit. We are a Jewish state in an age when nationalism and religion is under assault. We are a democracy fighting against terrorism in an age when the use of force is perceived to be illegitimate in many quarters, and we're constantly having to defend ourselves and simply giving more and more images that people who believe or take part in this zeitgeist have a deep and serious problem with. And that's why Israel's core opponents is made up of what David Horowitz once called an unholy alliance by militant Islamists and their fellow travelers and radical leftists. Very extreme force on the far left. Now, what's happened in recent years is that this core, which is driving most of this animosity towards us, and it's funded by regimes in this region, this core is metastasizing. It's spreading. And it's reaching progressives and liberals, young people throughout the world. Now, once you understand that this is the core problem that we face, you can understand why we have a much greater problem in Europe than we have in the United States. You can understand why we have a much greater problem in the heart of